I think Chris won it. To be honest, with the sheer effort that Conor put in, it should have been like a majority, maybe a couple of rounds. Do you know what I mean? I didn't have it so wide. But look, the right man won.
Peter Fury didn't hold back in his assessment of the Chris Eubank Jr. versus Conor Benn showdown. According to Fury, while Conor Benn put in a tremendous effort and showed undeniable heart, the victory rightfully belonged to Eubank Jr. Fury made it clear that despite Benn's grit, the fight wasn't as close as some had claimed. In his eyes, Eubank Jr. was in control from start to finish. The right man won, and it wasn't up for debate. Fury
The pride involved, and either one would rather die than lose. So there was so much at stake.
acknowledged Benn's desperation and fighting spirit, but emphasized that raw effort alone wasn't enough to tip the balance. Eubank Jr. displayed a superior mindset, sharper technique, and a will to dominate. He didn't just edge it, he owned the ring. Fury noted the desperation in Conor Benn's eyes throughout the bout, underlining how much was at stake. Not just titles, but pride, survival, and legacy. Benn was fighting like a man determined not to lose, throwing himself into wild exchanges and taking risks.
I was happy. I already knew what he could do, so it wasn't impressed, wasn't about it. But I knew what he could do, and I'm happy he done it. He was listening, and he did exactly what I thought he'd do, and I'm happy about it.
But Eubank Jr. kept his composure, operating on a different level. His game plan, mental strength, and ability to stay cool under fire marked him as the more complete fighter. According to Fury, Benn was outclassed, and Eubank Jr.'s victory was both deserved and decisive. Jonathan Banks echoed that sentiment, praising Eubank Jr. for executing a nearly flawless strategy. Banks applauded Eubank's discipline and patience, stating that his boxing IQ was simply superior to Benn's. While many expected an early knockout or a dramatic finish, Banks said the plan was always to break Benn down methodically.
Because Conor Benn is not a concussive puncher. It seems to be at 154. He's up against a big middleweight, right? That's number one. Conor Benn was too desperate trying to knock out a guy. He was loading up too much, but he fought his heart out, and all the credit in the world should be given to Conor Benn. Chris Eubank Jr., all the credit in the world should be given to him, because we was looking at this like, oh, well, can he do the weight? What's going to happen now? He's going to get knocked out, all the rest of it. And I mean, I had a real strong...
As Benn grew more desperate, throwing wild punches in search of a miracle shot, Eubank Jr. remained composed, picked his moments, and maintained control. Banks also took a shot at critics who doubted Eubank Jr.'s ability to cut weight effectively or handle the pressure. In his eyes, this performance silenced all the doubters and proved that Chris is still a dangerous and calculated force in the division. Spencer Fearon offered a hard-hitting perspective, dismantling the popular narrative around the fight. He argued that Conor Benn never had the power to trouble someone like Eubank Jr., especially not at 154 pounds. Benn might be dangerous in spurts, but Fearon highlighted the mismatch.
I was expecting a split. I thought it could be a draw, and when I heard unanimous, I thought, I thought, I bet we're not going to get it now. And when I heard 116, 112, I got to be honest with you, I was really disappointed, because I don't believe it was an 8-4 fight.
In size and natural strength. He criticized Benn for loading up on desperate shots, hoping to land something big. That strategy, according to Fearon, was never going to work against a seasoned and conditioned middleweight like Eubank Jr. Still, he credited Benn for his bravery and intensity, but made it clear that Eubank Jr. was in control. For Fearon, the outcome wasn't just predictable, it was inevitable. Eddie Hearn, however, saw things differently. Visibly disappointed with the unanimous decision, he admitted he had expected a far tighter contest, perhaps even a draw or a split decision. Hearn was especially skeptical of the wide margins on the scorecards, particularly the 116 to 100.
I don't know if it was so much Conor surprised me how well he boxed, because of the way Chris Eubank must have been feeling, because he was, he looked terrible on the scales. Absolutely.
12 verdicts. He believed the fight was much more competitive than the judges suggested. In his view, Benn's performance deserved more recognition. Hearn praised his fighter's heart, work rate, and relentless pressure, insisting that Conor pushed Eubank Jr. to the brink. While he accepted the loss, he argued that the official scores didn't reflect the full story of the fight. Billy Nelson offered a more scathing critique, not just of the fight, but of Eubank Jr. himself. Nelson pointed out how poor Eubank Jr. looked on the scales and questioned his overall conditioning.
He's still a baby in the sport. He's still got learning to do. And I think fighting Eubank Jr., who would mostly be entering the ring bigger than he would last time, I just can't see it.
He admitted Benn's performance was better than expected, but felt the fight raised serious concerns about Eubank Jr.'s physical readiness. And yet, Benn couldn't take advantage. To Nelson, that said more about Benn being out of his depth than Eubank's vulnerability. Despite Chris's apparent struggles, Benn couldn't capitalize, fueling speculation that he simply wasn't on the same level. In the aftermath of such a fierce and emotional battle, one question echoes in the minds of fans. What would Nigel Benn, Conor's father and a British boxing icon, have said about his son's performance? Pride, disappointment, encouragement? The debate.
He was cut to the eye. Obviously, they gave so much in that fight. And maybe not for the purists, because it was a street fight, but to the mainstream audience, it was a fight that crossed over.
Rages on. One thing is clear. This was more than just a fight. It was a war of legacy, pressure, and pride. And when the dust settled, Chris Eubank Jr. emerged not only victorious, but validated. Joe Gallagher didn't hold back when assessing Conor Benn's chances in the ring against Chris Eubank Jr. In his brutally honest analysis, Gallagher made it clear that Benn is still far from being ready to compete at Eubank's level. Describing Benn as a baby in the sport, Gallagher emphasized the vast difference in experience, composure, and ring IQ between the two fighters. While
Conor Benn can fight anybody from 147 to 154 to 160. Conor Benn can fight who he wants. Both of them can almost handpick who they want to fight next.
May be eager and aggressive, Gallagher warned that the rematch, if it happens, would only be more dangerous. Eubank Jr., already operating at an elite level, would be even sharper and more dominant the next time around. According to Gallagher, Benn may have heart, but he's playing catch-up in a game where Eubank is already miles ahead. Gareth A. Davies echoed this harsh truth, highlighting Eubank Jr.'s savage grit and unshakable resilience. He pointed to a pivotal moment in the fight where Eubank sustained a brutal eye cut but refused to let it affect his performance. While chaos unfolded in the
a really good fight. I think it was a lot closer than what it was. Commend Conor Benn immensely because he put on an amazing performance. Remember, he's a welterweight. Never really boxed at world-class level at 160 or around that. Chris has more experience on the world scene than Conor has, but Conor did himself proud. I think the right man won.
The ring, Eubank stood firm, fighting with clarity and control. On the other hand, Davies noted that Conor Benn often resembled a brawler rather than a disciplined boxer, swinging wildly with little strategy. This wasn't a tactical boxing display, it was a gritty war, and Eubank thrived in that environment. Benn's lack of control and structure was exposed, while Eubank's ability to remain composed under fire solidified his reputation as a fighter made for the big stage. Spencer Oliver joined the chorus, stressing that it was Eubank's mental toughness and calm under pressure that ultimately carried him through. In the face of adversity, Eubank didn't panic. He adjusted, calculated.
All that fight really showed us last night that a good big un beats a good little un. They're good, they're not great. So Eubank wins the fight. Where he goes from here in terms of world level, I don't know, because I don't want to pour cold water on the fight.
And executed his strategy with precision. It's this kind of mental fortitude, Oliver said, that separates true champions from pretenders. Sam Jones took it even further, directly calling out Conor Benn for overestimating his own abilities. Ben has repeatedly claimed he can fight anyone from 147 to 160 pounds, but Jones wasn't convinced. According to him, Ben's history of carefully selecting opponents suggests he knows he's not yet elite. The performance against Eubank Jr. only reinforced that narrative. Despite the bravado, Ben fell apart under the pressure of a real fight. Meanwhile, Eubank Jr., battle-tested and experienced, stood strong.
What a great match that would be. They have a similar physicality, and it was just so exciting to see two guys. And as for Conor Benn, he had to give away 18 pounds maybe. He never took a step backwards, and almost 70,000 fans, British fans, are still the best, no doubt about it. Great night of boxing.
And delivered. Jones believes Benn's image as a fearless contender took a major hit, and that his future in the upper echelons of boxing is far from secure. Johnny Nelson offered a more nuanced take, acknowledging that the fight was much closer than the scorecards reflected. He gave Conor Benn credit for showing bravery by stepping up to a weight class he wasn't familiar with, 160 pounds. Benn's effort, resilience, and flashes of skill didn't go unnoticed. However, Nelson pointed out that the deciding factor in the fight was Eubank Jr.'s world-class experience. Eubank's conditioning, boxing IQ, and familiarity with high-level competition made all the difference. Despite Benn's best efforts, Nelson emphasized that Eubank showed the strategy, poise, and discipline needed to claim a hard-fought, well-earned win. Duke McKenzie was far less forgiving in his breakdown. He bluntly stated that Chris Eubank Jr. operates on an entirely different level than Conor Benn. McKenzie didn't sugarcoat it. Benn was simply overwhelmed by Eubank's power, precision, and aggression. According to him, their encounter served as a harsh lesson for Benn, one that exposed just how much growth is still required before he can compete with fighters of Eubank's caliber. McKenzie went as far as to suggest that Benn should reconsider any idea of a rematch, warning that the outcome would likely remain unchanged. In his view, Eubank's size, experience, and relentless nature are too much for Benn to handle, and another bout would likely be another one-sided affair. Michael Buffer brought a different perspective, focusing on the spectacle and energy surrounding the fight. Buffer was electrified by the matchup, calling it one of the most thrilling and dramatic encounters in recent boxing history. He praised the clash of contrasting styles, Eubank's technical edge against Benn's relentless drive, as a recipe for explosive action. What stood out most to Buffer, however, was Conor Benn's fearless approach. Despite giving up nearly 18 pounds, Benn charged forward with the heart of a warrior, never backing down. Buffer also praised the British fans, calling them the best in the world, with 70,000 packing the arena and creating an unforgettable atmosphere. The energy, intensity, and passion in the building made it feel like a classic, and Buffer believes it's a night that will be remembered for years to come. With such polarizing reactions and opinions, one thing is certain: this wasn't just another fight. It was a battle of legacy, pride, and skill. Chris Eubank Jr.'s victory may have solidified his place in the sport, but Conor Benn's willingness to test himself continues to spark conversation. As fans eagerly await the next chapter, the boxing world remains divided, but undeniably intrigued.